Check, 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 check. Sorry, check, check, check.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just say
Sitting for very little people. I got your photography yesterday. You're gonna have to grill her for information.
that Zoom. Why still I wasn't playing? I'm studying to feel the sun.
I did tell the producers that we had about an hour of file footage of people going into the federal courthouse. So if we have any case pending.
Yeah. Well,
Oh yeah, Bob shot that.
I was wondering what that car was.
9?
I know.
Here we go.
Do we know who this is?
I don't know who that is.
Hey. Not sure.
Random cell phone? Anyone?
Yeah.
Anyone?
Do you, it, okay.
We were holding it as evidence.
Yeah. I'm like, oh. Okay, I think I'm gonna put all that right there. Okay, well, good morning. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Earlier this month, I deployed members of the Iowa State Patrol to the U.S. southern border to support law enforcement and border security efforts. I made this decision because the federal government has abdicated its duty. Texas law enforcement and border agents are being overwhelmed, and the crisis at the border isn't staying at the border. It's being felt across the country, including right here in Iowa. During the 14-day mission known as Operation Lone Star, our troopers were deployed to the Del Rio sector, where the porous border has acted as a magnet for illegal migrants and their exploiters, not only from Mexico, but from countries all over the world. Up until the time that our law enforcement left, immigrants from 88 countries, Venezuela, China, Ethiopia, Pakistan, and many more had been encountered at the Del Rio sector. Our officers increased law enforcement's visibility in border towns, provided humanitarian aid, worked as a force multiplier for the Texas Department of Public Safety, and supported the enforcement of the laws in a variety of ways. They provided tactical support, patrolled dangerous streets, and deployed SWAT-trained troopers to pursue and detain illegal migrants in the desert. In this role, they successfully confiscated illegal weapons and drugs and thwarted human traffickers. Last week, Operation Lone Star came to an end, and our troopers have returned home. I want to thank Commissioner Baines and the 28 members of his team who volunteered for this critical assignment. In a moment, you're going to have the opportunity to hear more about the border mission from Commissioner Baines, Colonel Folk, and Captain Mark Miller. On June 10th, Governor Abbott and Governor Ducey formally requested assistance from all 50 states under the Emergency Management Compact, or EMAC, to aid them in securing the southern border from a record-breaking influx of illegal border crossings, drug smugglers, and human traffickers. Like the 6 other states, Florida, Idaho, Arkansas, Nebraska, Ohio, and South Dakota, that sent their own law enforcement or National Guard, Iowa responded for a simple reason. This crisis at the border was and remains a humanitarian crisis with consequences that reach far beyond Texas and Arizona. While the majority of those attempting to enter the country illegally are single adults, we also know a significant number of children are being cruelly exploited by coyotes, smugglers, and bad actors of all stripes. To criminals like these, our border looks like an open invitation, and it's vulnerable migrants and law-abiding citizens who are paying the price. At the time we made the decision to send the members of the Iowa State Patrol, border encounters had just reached a 20-year high. They rose again in June, defying expectations that border activity would decrease during the warmer summer months. Encounters have in fact now topped 1 million in this fiscal year alone. Law enforcement officials were also recovering elevated levels of weapons and illegal narcotics smuggled into our country. There were 3 times as many fentanyl seizures in May as there were in the same month the year prior. Seizures increased again in June, with this year's total now 78% higher in 2021 than all of 2020. And Iowa is also feeling the effects. From January to May of this year, we seized 6,641 grams of fentanyl, which is a staggering increase of over 1,100% from last year, where we seized 523 grams. In addition, in the first quarter of 2021, Iowa saw the most methamphetamine seized in a single quarter since 2018. According to DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the vast majority of methamphetamines that are available in the U.S. is produced in Mexico and smuggled across the southern border. These aren't just numbers. Lives are on the line. And last year, fentanyl overdoses in Iowa increased by a disturbing 20%. As the federal government effectively ignores its constitutional duty to secure our border, states must act, and Iowa has. When Iowa's law enforcement briefed me on their mission, they told me in no uncertain terms how appreciative the law enforcement and border authorities were for the support that Iowa provided. I want to just say today how much we appreciate your service and your stepping up and helping. Very appreciative of that. So with that, I'm going to invite Commissioner Baines up to say a few words, as well as introduce the Colonel and the Captain. Commissioner?
Good morning. 12 straight days, 12-hour, sometimes 16-hour shifts, extreme heat, unforgiving terrain, challenging geopolitical dynamics. But the men and the women of the Iowa State Patrol showed up. They did their job. They came to the aid of the people of Texas. They showed care and compassion to scores of undocumented migrants. And they supported their brothers and sisters in law enforcement with the Texas Department of Public Safety. They showed up. During their deployment, they performed 4 core duties. They conducted high visibility patrols throughout the Del Rio sector of Texas. They engaged in humanitarian efforts at river crossings and border gates. They disrupted criminal networks seeking to evade law enforcement, and they investigated human smuggling occurring throughout our southwest border. In the spring of this year, the 8 counties in the Del Rio sector of Texas experienced a spike in criminal activity. As an example, law enforcement in the Del Rio area had 331 pursuits between March and May of this year. To put that into a little bit of context, the Iowa State Patrol had 333 pursuits statewide in the 2020 calendar year. 2 off in 3 months in just 8 counties in Del Rio, Texas. Crime was spiking. Motor vehicle thefts were up. Texas law enforcement authorities in the Del Rio sector recovered 200 stolen vehicles in that 3-month period. The genesis for those stolen vehicles in large part were based on a growing trend amongst the human smuggling community, where individuals were stealing motor vehicles and utilizing them to smuggle immigrants into the United States. And once they reached their locations, they would either abandon the car, or if they were encountered by law enforcement, they would simply flee. Property thefts, burglaries, criminal trespass, damage to property was all on the rise in Del Rio, Texas, and the residents didn't feel safe. In an effort to bring these criminal trends under control, the Texas Department of Public Safety initiated high visibility patrols. They needed to saturate the area in an effort to stem some of the criminal activity that was occurring there. But in order to do that, they needed to have the personnel. And quite frankly, they did not have the personnel to accomplish it safely. In order to be effective in doing this, they needed to operate in 2-person patrol units, and they simply did not have the people to man it in that fashion. And that's really where our folks came in. They operate as a force multiplier for the Texas Department of Highway Patrol. Our troopers were paired up with troopers in Texas and operated two-person cars and had conducted those high visibility patrols. So just a couple of examples of our folks operating during those time periods. Those high visibility patrols were effective, and the positive effects soon followed. In the month of June, there were 50 fewer pursuits than there had been the month before. And during our time, during the month of July in the Del Rio area, that trend continued. Motor vehicle thefts dropped as well, as did the general property crimes they were experiencing. Our folks commented repeatedly how frequently they were stopped in the Del Rio area, in Eagle Pass, by citizens, thanking them for showing up, thanking them for giving their communities back to them. Our troopers to a person said they were incredibly humbled by the sincere show of gratitude from the residents of Texas. On the humanitarian front, our troopers were assigned to frequently used river crossings and border gates to ensure the health and safety of undocumented migrants as they sought entry into the United States. Our troopers routinely stepped in and assisted struggling families as they attempted to cross the Rio Grande River with their young children. There's just a couple of examples of our folks assisting in that fashion. As you can see, it's young families, young folks struggling through waist-deep, chest-deep water as they sought entry into the United States. Powerful pictures. Additionally, our folks served at the border gates. On at least one day, we had 400 to 500 individuals show up at the Del Rio border gate. Many of these folks were from Haiti, from Venezuela, from Ethiopia. They showed up in mass early in the morning. Unfortunately, the Border Patrol did not have the personnel to even begin to process this influx of individuals. As the day wore on and as the heat rose, the humanitarian need grew exponentially. Our folks jumped to their aid. Immediately, with Texas authorities, started to bring in water, started to bring in extra rations, MREs, meals ready to eat, from local hurricanes, and started to care for those 400 to 500 people that showed up at the gates. Treating multiple people for heat exhaustion. I believe even Captain Miller can tell you of a woman from Ethiopia that went into labor, and assisting her to get the medical care she needed at those gates. The humanitarian need was significant. Pivoting, our tactical folks had a much different mission. Their role was to interdict and disrupt criminal networks who were engaged in human trafficking, drug trafficking, and human smuggling. A group of our folks were actually assigned to the Texas Rangers and trackers with the Border Patrol to interdict these groups. What we commonly found is those individuals, those families that were generally seeking entry, they tended to seek our folks out. They willfully looked for law enforcement for aid and assistance. This group and these groups were markedly different. They were actively attempting to evade law enforcement, and they were attempting to evade law enforcement for legitimate reasons. Either they were engaged in human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, or had criminal histories that would bar them from entry into the United States. And it was these groups that were incredibly concerning. And so as a result, our troopers, who are tactically trained, spent a lot of time in the desert. High heat, punishing conditions, on foot, tracking large groups of individuals seeking to evade law enforcement, on ATVs, in pickup trucks, extremely punishing, extremely difficult, but their mission was pure, and they attacked it with the sense of duty we would expect from Iowa State Patrol troopers. The other piece of it was human smuggling. Our special agent that went down there, who was a Spanish speaker, along with a member of our tactical members, were also assigned with actively investigating human smuggling. They performed a significant amount of surveillance in areas and locations where known human smuggling was occurring. This often was dilapidated homes, abandoned trailers, and the conditions that our troopers found these folks living in, quite frankly, being housed in, was appalling. Here's just a few examples of kind of what we would find. You'd find little to no utilities, no running water. You'd find dirty mattresses strewn throughout these homes, these trailers. You'd find garbage rotting in the corner, completely and wholly unsanitary in every respect. Those that were involved with the human smuggling were charged, and those undocumented individuals who were being smuggled were turned over to border authorities for processing. So this was the scope and nature of our work. They worked hard. I'm proud of them. They did Iowa proud. I mean, they brought Iowa values to Texas. They worked hard when hard work was required. They showed compassion when compassion was needed. And I'm proud of them. And I know the people of Texas appreciated it. So with some hard data, I'm going to invite Colonel Folk to come up and give you a little more idea as to the amount of things and the number of individuals we encountered. Colonel?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. I'd like to reiterate the Commissioner's comments. The Iowa State Patrol made a positive impact in Texas. They were appreciated by the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the public was overwhelmed with the support we provided down there. On July 8th, 27 troopers and 1 agent traveled to Texas to support the Texas Department of Public Safety. The troopers worked on the ground for 12 days and returned July 12th, as you were returned July 22nd. We sent 12 road troopers, 12 tactical team troopers, 3 command staff supervisors, and 1 special agent that was bilingual that assisted with some significant investigations in the state of Texas. The Iowa State Patrol command staff strategically selected the 27 troopers that traveled to Texas. The personnel selected for these assignments are stationed throughout the state of Iowa. Our goal is to ensure there is no negative impact to the operational functions here in Iowa, and we're confident that we maintained that stature. We facilitate a similar practice as we select personnel to support RAGBRAI and to support the Iowa State Fair. All personnel that traveled to Texas volunteered for this assignment, and we're very proud of them for doing that. The Iowa State Patrol road troopers paired up and worked with Texas DPS troopers. Our troopers encountered 184 undocumented persons at the Rio Grande River crossing. The troopers provided humanitarian support to over 800 or more documented and undocumented individuals at the U.S. border fence by providing food, water, and humanitarian aid. Throughout our deployment in Texas, we encountered approximately 1,400 undocumented individuals during our time there. Our road enforcement personnel performed traffic enforcement duties in conjunction with Texas troopers. We encountered 3 impaired drivers, 6 narcotics arrests, a traffic stop involving child exploitation, and assisted with 12 felony arrests. Our tactical team officers assisted locating individuals, as the Commissioner said, that were attempting to evade law enforcement with a criminal nexus. Our secondary team assisted with human smuggling investigations and illegal narcotics trafficking. While working in Texas, the Iowa Department of Public Safety encountered and was involved in 12 human smuggling investigations that were significant in nature. During our time frame from July 9th to the 22nd of July, the overall law enforcement collaborative efforts led to 240 criminal arrests, 51 motor vehicle pursuits, the seizure of 948 pounds of marijuana, the seizure of 37 pounds of cocaine and methamphetamine, 18 firearms, and seized $1.7 million in currency. Yesterday, I spoke with the Assistant Chief of the Texas Department of Public Safety with their Highway Patrol Division. And what Justin Crane says is, we value our partnership with the Iowa State Patrol, and the personnel from Iowa enhanced safety in Texas, and we appreciated their support. Captain Mark Miller with the Iowa State Patrol volunteered and was also hand-selected to serve and lead Iowa's response in Texas. He previously deployed with the National Guard for approximately 6 months, supervising 650 airmen and soldiers working border security operations in the state of Arizona. We knew Captain Miller had the leadership to take care of Iowans as we traveled to Texas. I'd like to finalize my comments by saying we're proud of our troopers. They made a difference, and they made a positive impact in the state of Texas. It's my pleasure to introduce Captain Mark Miller of the Iowa State Patrol.
Thank you, Colonel. Good morning, and I am Mark Miller with your Iowa State Patrol. I had the honor of leading 27 of the finest law enforcement officers I've worked with, all from your Department of Public Safety down to this Texas mission that we went on. I want to kind of give you an idea of what it looked like for us, the boots on the ground, when we got there, and how we tried to accomplish the mission objectives that were set for us by the Department of Public Safety in Texas. Really when we got there, we were given 3 mission objectives as I looked at it, and the Commissioner and the Colonel have kind of gone over both those already, but is that protection of the citizens, safety of the immigrants, and disruption of criminal activities. Not one function was more important than the other. They all had the same importance to them. It was just 3 things that we had to complete. On the protection of the citizens, it was simple. Some of the things they were worried about down there was their increase in pursuits, as we talked already. With pursuits come a lot of dangers to the public. You have accidents that happen with the pursuits. You have thefts. You have fatalities. You lose people. You hurt people. And pursuits are one of the worst things that a law enforcement officer can deal with. We just don't want to have those happening, so we had to figure out how to slow those down. We decided a large visual presence was probably the best way to do it. We wanted to put troopers on all the roadways in the area, whether it was a small roadway, a farm roadway, or as a major highway or an interstate system. We wanted troopers visible. Every time you drove on that road, you were going to see patrol cars either sitting there watching everything or with people pulled over. Our mission in that was we didn't patrol on our own. We didn't take our Iowa State trooper cars down there in a patrol function. We teamed up with the Texas troopers. And we sat with the Texas trooper, and you were in the passenger side, and you assisted them with things as you went through it. We wanted to reduce the crimes committed in the local community. Same thing, this large visual presence was to help reduction of those crimes, because as the commissioner had said, the people had a lot of crimes are associated with the human smuggling. When people are coming through your property, they're damaging your fences, they're trying to get into locked gates, they're trying to get into your home even sometimes because they're hungry, they want food. Maybe they're trying to steal your car at different times because they want transportation out of there. So there was a lot of personal damage to the public in the area. The other thing we want to do, other than just being seen and reduce the pursuits, or reduce the crime in the community, was the criminal addiction traffic stops. They wanted the troopers to have that ability with the second person in the car they had it to ask extra questions when a stop was made. This would be focused on human trafficking questions, human smuggling questions, weapons trafficking, and narcotics trafficking. And the last thing, of course, was the force multiplier part of it. You just made those Texas troopers have that ability to actually enter a high-risk situation on their own. They didn't have to wait for backup anymore because that backup was already with them. In the past, if they came across a group of smugglers, usually the smuggler got away because after the pursuit, or maybe they just ditched their cart. Sometimes the smuggler would run into the desert and would leave the poor aliens sitting in the car or the truck, and the trooper had to deal with them. They couldn't actually go after the smuggler. We wanted to go after the problem. We wanted to go after the smugglers. The safety of the immigrants, that was next on our list. Protection from crime. Many are victimized after they reach the United States. It's sad to think, but it happens every day there, and they would tell multiple stories of this. These immigrants come into our country, you think they're going to be okay, but after they get here, they get human trafficked. They get smuggled. They are used for used in sexual assaults. The kids are sold sometimes. We had countless stories of the coyotes, even inside of our country, would use these women along their journey just to do whatever they wanted with them, like they were just a piece of meat during the journey itself. We wanted to make sure that had stopped. We didn't want this victimization to keep going. Protection from the elements. In that Del Rio sector, they had 66 deaths from the elements this year that they know of so far. 66 deaths of people. Most of them, 25, were due to extreme heat. So we wanted to make sure people weren't lost in the desert. We wanted to be able to get them out of the desert environment and get them to a safer environment. River crossings, 24 drownings that they knew of had happened. During my time there, we had at least 3 times we were looking for bodies that we were reported by the immigrants that had drowned the night before. So it is dangerous there, and a lot of people get hurt. Not to mention just the dangers of traveling through a desert. You've got rattlesnakes, you've got lots of poisonous spiders, you've got just bad terrain where people can get hurt on. If they get hurt out there, those coyotes don't wait for them. They just move on and leave those people sitting there stranded with no chance of any help. And I think just their general health. A lot of these people have been on a long journey, so once they got their feet into our country, we wanted to make sure that they had water, they had food if they needed it, and they had medical care. There wasn't a trooper in Texas that I met that didn't have a case of water in their trunk at all times just to make sure that they had water for people as it went. The disruption of criminal activities, we attacked this in 2 ways. Intelligence and surveillance gathering was one aspect of it, and the other was actively patrolling and searching the known trafficking areas and smuggling areas. Did we accomplish these goals? Yeah, I believe we did. In fact, I'm confident that we did, and this is why. When it comes to protection of the citizens, there's a drastic drop in pursuits of stolen vehicles that were recovered, and just the pursuits and the accidents that happened with those pursuits when the troopers from out of state started showing up. So when the Nebraska troopers, the Florida troopers, the Ohio troopers after us, and Idaho, people started showing up in the state to be force multipliers, you could see the reduction in the pursuits, and that reduction is getting even farther and farther as we move into it. We've cut the pursuits in half in that area so far. It even goes as far as the immigrants and the smugglers are always interviewed as they cross into the country, as the Border Patrol does their mission. And the immigrants and the smugglers would relate to them that the people that used to come and pick them up, the people they'd reach out to come and get them, were scared to drive in that Del Rio sector because of the amount of troopers that were in the area. They were scared to come in and pick up and hit their human smuggling role. The citizens would openly thank us. The citizens of Del Rio were a lot like the citizens of Iowa, being in rural Iowa. They were very appreciative towards law enforcement. They're very rural. They're very kind. They're nice people. You hear Texas nice, it's a real thing, and we witnessed it there. They would come and thank us. They said their community had been turned into a spot where they didn't feel safe at night. They always had a neighbor telling them, hey, someone tried to get into my shed last night. Someone tried to break into my car last night, or my car was missing, my ATV was missing. And that just leaves an unsettling feeling in your person. If you're worried every night that someone's going to break into your home, you don't know if they're good people or bad people. And they talked about how that had really cut down drastically, and they were feeling safe again. And they told us this time and time again, trooper after trooper. The Texas troopers, they would tell us how much safer they felt. They had a partner with them now. When I said we were going to cover in roads all over the place, small ones and little ones, some of these were very rural areas, and we would keep people on overnight shifts with their trooper as they partnered up, and they would tell you just that sense of security, not having to wait for backup, knowing that you had another state trooper next to you, another person had the same type of training and the same abilities that you had, so you knew if you had to react to a situation that they were in good hands. They appreciated us being there, and it made them feel better, and it gave them that ability that if a high-risk situation did develop, they could actually react to it instead of just have to stand by and wait for more backup to get there. The safety of immigrants, we definitely met that goal. We talked about the gate surge. So the way it works, you have the Rio Grande River, and you have places that aren't meant for crossing. They're not meant for bringing people in. They're not the ports of entry you'd have in your country. And you'd have a couple hundred yards between the Rio Grande into the United States where an actual gate would be set up. That's where these people would show up. Previously, I think 115 people is the most they'd ever processed through a gate in a day. And we had a day they started showing up 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 plus people, and that lasted for about a day and a half. No matter how many people they took, it just kept building up for about a day and a half. We saw a lot of good things happen there, a lot of sad things as you're watching these people that have come through. But we reacted. The Texas Department of Public Safety reacted quickly. They found MREs to feed these people. They weren't ready to feed them. They had to find these MREs to feed them. Water we had for them. We gave them the water. And again, when I went to visit the gate and check on my troopers, I had one of our female troopers come up to me and she goes, hey, Captain, we got a problem. There's a lady in here, and it looks like by her body actions that she might be in labor. She was rubbing her belly. It just didn't look healthy. We went and checked on it. Sure enough, she was going to labor. We had to get her an ambulance. And it's not just as simple as getting an ambulance. You have to get the ambulance there, and you have to go into the crowd on the other side of the fence and bring her in without bringing other people in at the time until everybody's secured. It was tough. We did a lot on that side of it. The river crossings, we had a trooper always assigned to a river crossing 24 hours a day, and the river crossing has no gates. It's literally just that. It's a river crossing. They deem it to be the safest spot they can go through, although it's a river, and it changes in depth, it changes in current, and it's pretty dangerous. A coyote would kind of show them the way, and then they'd have to try to navigate through. A lot of children are swept away at this area. When we first got there, we didn't know what to expect. What we found is when they came across the river, when they saw us, they were smiling. When they saw us, they reached out to us. They'd reach their hands to us to pull them out of the river side of it. They felt safe finally. They knew that they were going to wait there, and the Border Patrol was going to come and process them, and they'd be on the rest of their journey and whatever they had to do with it. So the relief that was there, and the acts of kindness and generosity you saw from the officers at the scenes. I saw officers take little kids and put them in their patrol car so they could have air conditioning and they could sleep while they were waiting 12, 13, 14 hours for Border Patrol sometimes to get there. You'd see them get them food, diapers in some cases. The troopers would go out and purchase. Some Florida troopers actually bought flip-flops in case they ran into people that didn't have shoes when they came across. So you saw a lot of generosity at those spots. And in one case, on a traffic stop, we even found an immigrant who was laying in the back of the bed of a pickup truck, and she was so severely dehydrated that when we called the medics didn't think she would have made it more than another hour or two without dying. So those types of tragedies happen there all the time. And last, did we disrupt criminal activities? Yes, absolutely. I can't go into details because it's not our operations. This is the Texas Rangers operations, it's Border Patrol operations, the Texas Department of Public Safety operations. So I can't go into details on how things are conducted because there's operational security issues with that. But I can tell you this. During our time there, one investigation recovered a minor runaway who was being sex trafficked. We gathered a lot of intelligence on a lot of different smuggling activities. We identified members of at least 2 different major criminal organizations, and we assisted in at least 12 human smuggling investigations. So we made an impact in that area too. In conclusion, your Iowa troopers and special agents met their missions and objectives. They performed both law enforcement and humanitarian functions, and they represented the state of Iowa in a way you can be extremely proud of. Thank you.
This wasn't a decision that I entered into lightly, but I don't know how anyone, after hearing the stories, the statistics, the mission, and the outcomes that were accomplished by our team that went down to help the Texas Department of Public Safety secure the border. I am so proud of what this team did and the impact in just a short time frame that they had on the area, on the people, across the board. And I can't reiterate enough about how proud I am as the governor of this state, how proud I am of law enforcement in this state, their professionalism, their compassion, and their sense of duty, whether they're in the state or whether they're helping out, as you said, a brother and sister in law enforcement in Texas. So again, I just want to thank you, Captain Miller, for leading. Colonel Funk, thank you for the update. And Commissioner Baines, thank you for your continued incredible leadership of the Iowa State Patrol. We are very blessed. And with that, we'll open it up for questions on topic.
Governor, do you have details about the cost of the mission yet?
We're still working on that, so we'll get that to you. But again, you know, these are troopers that would be salaried, that would be working here in the state of Iowa. And instead of doing the work in the Iowa, their mission was shifted to Texas. So we'll show you what the overall cost, what it would be for their employment here, and what it would cost to go down there. So we're continuing to work on that. I don't know unless you have any update on that, Steve.
I can ballpark it for you,
Okay.
at least. So it's still a little bit in flux, but it looks like about right now we're just a short under $50,000 in hard costs. So that would be lodging, food, gas, vehicle rentals, some additional equipment that they needed, like camelbacks, those sorts of things. It's going to be about $150,000 in overtime costs, and then about $100,000 in what would be their traditional salaries. So it looks like total would be a tick under $300,000, but $100,000 of that would have been salary costs we would have incurred anyways.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
What was the impact of them not being in Iowa doing their normal duties.
So you actually took that into account. You want to just reiterate it, or whoever said that? You did. No, okay.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
We take these matters very seriously. We have RAGBRAI going right now. We got extreme heat. We have 21 troopers out supporting that endeavor, plus another 8 or 10 locals, so we're right at about 30. We have the Iowa State Fair coming up, where we have a significant more amount of troopers working that event to maintain security. So these frequently occur, these special assignments. We've had the National Governors Conference that pulls in 50-plus troopers. So we strategically look with our leadership element, like Captain Miller and our lieutenants, to say, okay, where can we strategically spare a trooper that we will minimize the impact and negate any impact to the state of Iowa?
So will they be going back to Texas?
So I just want to say, too, and I had full confidence, and that was relayed to me when we made the decision to go. Right now, we have 2 significant events happening in the state of Iowa with the RAGBRAI and then the Iowa State Fair. So after we make it through, after those 2 events are finished, we'll continue to monitor the situation on the border, continue to work with the department, with the Texas Governor Abbott, as well as Governor Ducey, and we'll reevaluate that going forward.
So on the cost issue, I think earlier there was the issue of whether Texas would reimburse us under the
Right.
pact that you discussed earlier. Is that still a possibility, or is it basically something that the Iowa taxpayers will pay for?
Well, right now, it's probably, it looks like it would be the responsibility of Iowa. That's still open to potential maybe federal funds even coming in for that, but we'll continue to monitor that. But right now, again, that is everything that they talked about, it's not stopping in Texas and Arizona. That is infiltrating throughout the state. And so it is an investment that I believe was well spent in helping really secure the southern border, the humanitarian efforts that were put in place. I felt that it was the right thing to do.
Governor, you mentioned in part of your calculus that the situation at the border impacts Iowa. What would you say is the top impact in Iowa? Is it the drugs that you are bringing up, or what would it be?
Well, I think that's probably the largest significant increase that we've seen. Just with, we mentioned, I can give you some of the drug overdose deaths increased 20% over 2020. 35% of that increase was opioid overdose deaths. In 2021, we're only halfway through the year, and fentanyl has been implicated in 87% of opioid deaths in Iowa. So we're seeing that impact on Iowans. And so anytime that we can stop that from coming across the borders and into our states, we're going to do everything we can to do that. And we're seeing that significantly impact. And I can get you that data if you'd like that.
Well, Governor, on the other side of the drug overdose, the increase in drug overdose that you mentioned, do you have any plans for expanding access to substance abuse treatment or anything that would kind of help on the demand side?
Yeah, we're constantly looking at that, especially with opioid. Over the last couple legislative sessions, we've made some significant, took some significant steps in addressing the opioid concerns, the drug monitoring program, the electronic prescriptions, to name a few, the Good Samaritan law that we put in place. So we're continually reevaluating what we need to do to help address addiction in general. And that's been a passion of mine since I've been Lieutenant Governor, and we continue on a daily basis, especially as we see those numbers continue to escalate. And it's significant, and so it's impacting lives in the state of Iowa.
Have you been in touch with the Biden administration, either during or subsequent to this effort, just about the idea of governors getting together and working on the border matter kind of independently of the federal government?
Yeah, I think, we've contacted the team. We've made it very clear that we feel that this is the federal responsibility, that is their role to secure the southern borders. But because they're not, states are stepping up and doing that. It's their responsibility, but in the absence of them taking and protecting the border, we're stepping up to do that.
So what, in your view, happened in 2020 regarding fentanyl?
I think it had a lot to do with COVID, to be quite honest. You mean the increase?
Yeah.
Just the accessibility. But I think, we're still seeing the increase. I mean, it's no secret, Kay, that it's been coming across. It's always been an issue. But I think we're seeing the numbers increase. Do any of you have anything to add to that? I think we're seeing the numbers increase as the statistics demonstrate.
Well, I think you have maybe two different competing interests there. I mean, the first is maybe the opioid deaths and those sorts of problems that we saw in 2020. That may be more related to COVID, depression, isolation, those sorts of things. In terms of our seizures of fentanyl and heroin have spiked in 2021. So the numbers that the governor gave you earlier, those were the first couple of months of 2021 compared to 2020, where they've risen over 1,000%.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Will you take questions on other topics?
Yep, are we done? I'm just not going to make these guys stand up here. Unless, I don't know, Steve, you did a pretty good job on bringing me back on that one, so clarifying the two. So we just might not let you go. No, that's fine. Well, no.
So yesterday, the CDC put out new guidance for mask wearing, and you said it wasn't grounded in reality. One of the reasons that they gave for issuing that new guidance is the greater transmissibility of the Delta variant, even among people who are vaccinated. So can you explain further why you say that's not grounded in reality?
Well, first of all, it's frustrating, it's confusing. They're sending mixed messages constantly. They're telling Americans and Iowans, if you get a vaccine, you don't have to wear a mask, and then 2 weeks later, they change the message on that. I think it's contradictory. I think it sets us back in what we're trying to do with encouraging people to get vaccinated. I haven't seen the data. They're not really forthcoming on a lot of data that they're using to make this change in the guidance. And I really haven't seen any data that would support that states that don't issue a mask mandate versus states that do issue a mask mandate, the statistics are that much different. In fact, remember in November and December when we saw the surge, the entire country was red, and you couldn't distinguish between who had a mask mandate and who didn't.
So the state fair is coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And we have, I don't know, a lot of counties, maybe half of our counties in Iowa are either in the high transmission or whatever the next level is, I don't remember all the terms, but we have half of our counties really with a lot of transmission right now, according to the CDC anyway. And the state fair is going to bring 1 million people to our county. So number one, are you worried about that? Number two, I think you're on the fair board, so is there any advice to people if you're going to come to the state fair, this is what you should do to be safe?
Well, we're telling people to get vaccinated first and foremost. I've been very clear about that. That is the best defense to COVID. And so we've been very clear. We're extensively doing PSAs and we're making vaccines available. So availability is not an issue. We continue to do that. We continue to be very visible about why it's important to get vaccinated. In Iowa, we're actually, our numbers are pretty good, 18 and up. With at least one dose, we're at 65% that have been vaccinated. I think it's like 61% have fully been vaccinated. Iowans that are 65 and older, we're at 95%. That's a vulnerable population. We've had extremely good results in our long-term care facilities, which was a vulnerability as well. I think CDC says that 97% of the people that are being hospitalized have not been vaccinated. So it's a decision that they've made. They've made the calculation on whether to do it or not. And so I don't feel that we should punish everybody because some have made the decision not to. And I think we're doing a very good job of continuing to make the vaccines available. They'll be at the Iowa State Fair. Hy-Vee has agreed to set up a vaccination clinic there as well. So, people will make the decision. I don't know if they're taking into account the natural immunity if you've had COVID. That's another component of this discussion. Where is that in the recommendations that they're making? I know some countries are taking a look at that, so I'd like some more information from that perspective as well.
You did not appoint members to the Iowa Board of Public Health in the last legislative session. Was that an oversight, or was that intentional, along with your view of merging the Department of Human Services and the Department of Public Health? And if that's your goal, why didn't you ask legislators to do that?
Well, first of all, there's just a lot of misinformation out there regarding this. It's a state board of health. It's not a Senate-confirmed board. It happens to be a board where the term actually expires in June. So this isn't something that would have gone before the legislature. It wasn't one of the boards that expire in March, which a good share of them do. We have about 1,600 board positions that we appoint every year. We have to be politically balanced, geographic balanced. We have to be gender balanced in doing that. And so there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. So this board had a quorum throughout the pandemic. They have made the decision to meet every other month. They decided not to meet in June. They knew that they would have appointments that would be expiring the end of June. So if they felt the need to meet, they could have done that. They actually have precedence of doing that. I think they did that in October. And so the team we're really close. I think if not, we are at a quorum right now. So I think there's a lot of misinformation that went out regarding the Board of Health and how it was handled.
Thanks, everyone. Can you say anything about returning to school?
Do you think lawmakers should do anything about the board, about the Big 12?
Oh, I'm watching it closely. You know, I have a lot of, it's interesting, right? You know, I'll tell you, Kay, even my daughter said, hey, do you have any inside information on what Iowa State is going to do? I don't.